Coming up on Theater Talk.
People that stop being curious age in a different way. And people that put themselves in new and risky and challenging situations that ask of them other things. I hate the word senior, by the way.
We're selling junk in Izzy Peterman's company, Saratoga McDaniels, for him to go after Everson Steele. The bonds are paying 17% quarterly coupon, rated CCC.
Bob?
Murr, I want you to come in for more than usual. We're making our first play on the Dow Jones.
Right.
Shoulder to shoulder, Murray, deal by deal. That's what we're doing. We're making them see we can be the big muckers, too. I need you, Murr, more than ever.
Bob, I have to talk to you. It's Macy.
She all right? Your wife okay?
No, she's fine.
Okay.
It's just, I'm at $100 million in liquid assets. Bob, she doesn't want me to take any more risks. She wants me to stop.
She or you?
I don't want you to be mad.
4, maybe 5 million. That's what you came to me with 7 years ago.
Well, it was Macy's money.
No.
It was all hers, her dad.
No, that was hers. The rest, I made you. I make you rich.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins, and with me this week is my guest co-host, Jan Simpson, theater journalist, writer of the popular blog Broadway and Me, and now hosting the podcast Stagecraft for Broadway Radio. This week we're talking about the epic, chilling, wonderful play Junk at Lincoln Center's Beaumont Theater. It was written by our guest Ayad Akhtar and directed in all its epicness by Doug Hughes. Welcome back to Theater Talk, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This show is based, I believe, on the junk bond scandals of the 1980s. What made you decide to turn that into a play?
Right. It's not really based on the junk bond scandals. It's really more kind of composite of a lot of different things that happened at that era. The Revlon deal, the RJR Nabisco deal, the movie Wall Street, Michael Milken and Ivan Boesky and the insider trading scandals. I mean, all of those sort of mythic narratives, what I wanted to do was kind of composite them and distill them into one tale about a transformation of values at the heart of American life. And to do that through the process of showing a deal on stage and showing how business changes over the course of the deal making on stage. And so, yes, there are analogies to all sorts of events and sort of tales of that time, but it was really an attempt to kind of distill all of that into one mythic evening, if you will.
You're really talking about when things started to curdle even more because computers made it possible to cheat people much more. And although I wasn't alive and an adult at that time, I didn't understand it to the depth that you've made it clear in this play what was going on.
Well, the play is about a system, and it's about the system that's taken over our lives. We all like to think we live in a community or a landscape. We don't really. We live in a system. And people don't write plays about systems, about the expanse of society every day of the week. Old banking, new banking, corporate law, journalism, and the law, the federal system that enforces law, are all represented in this play. And that takes a great breadth of imagination.
And then yet in this system, you have these people who are being corrupted or destroyed or turned into monsters.
I don't know.
No?
I don't see it that way. I think that, it's hard for me to write a character if I don't love them. And it's hard for me to write a character if I don't identify where they come from. Merkin and the guys that he's surrounded with are fighting the good fight. And for them, they're really fighting a fight to make a place for themselves at the heart of American life, at the heart of American business life. They are shut out by the blue blood old, guard firms, and they are transforming. It's a disruptive technology that they're bringing to the table. They don't know what the consequence of that disruptive technology is going to be. I think there are two visions of capitalism that are battling it out in the play, and I think those two visions of capitalism are ones that it would do us, I think, some good to think more deeply about. One is a meritocratic vision of capitalism, which is not particularly sensitive to the consequences of itself, and the other is a more paternalistic version of capitalism, which is actually more embedded in communities. And these are the visions of capitalism that are at war right now in the world that we're living in. Of course, I think the meritocratic system has won out.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as idealistically driven as it may be, it is destroying the world and it's destroying us.
Why do you think it's idealistically driven?
Well, because I think in American life there is no higher good than the individual right to well-being, the individual right to express oneself, the individual right to accumulate as much wealth as is legal. There is no sense of a collective well-being anymore. And that's what the play is showing, is that when you enshrine individualism as the ultimate good, whether it's the individualism to make as much money as you can, or the individualism to use whatever bathroom you think you should use, you put those things before collective well-being, what you have is a country that begins to tear itself apart.
But when you bring up the bathroom issue or the, wanting
I'm
civil rights.
talking about individualism versus collective
but the
well-being.
people who think, I must have $3.7 billion, which is what Milken has today, and I have no problem with the fact that this is a system that will have many people not even making enough to live, that's perfectly okay.
Well, that happened. I mean,
Yeah.
that has happened. I mean, as witness the tax bill that we're being that was just passed. I mean, the notion of personal wealth as the ultimate expression of our lives as our birthright as Americans has taken hold with a kind of religious fervor. It's very hard to challenge wealth anymore. If you have money, you are smart. If you have money, you have
You're successful.
value, and you're successful in the society. Last week, our current president felt it was important to say to the South Korean Assembly in a region that could be the tinderbox for nuclear conflict, that the stock market was doing great. And that was a badge of how fantastic he is for America. Those numbers have become so important. When I was a kid, was there, 24-hour business coverage? There most certainly was not. We were thinking about other things. Today, that constant digital ticker is what's running the show. Its rhythm has become our rhythm.
One of the things that, as you talk about this is so pervasive in our society right now.
It's become our ideological framework. It's
But
become our
we
philosophical being.
We see it so seldom on stage.
Right.
Why do you think that is? I mean, it's so much.
Do you want the gracious answer to that, or do you want the
We want the real answer.
I'm going to jump in before I have time to justify. There are plays that are the plays of social questions that ask the easy, hard questions. And Ayad has decided he wants to ask the hard questions. The things that really will not find an instant resolution in a sentimental way. Take it for the...
Take it away.
Look, I think at the end of the day, art has generally been about a kind of call to our feeling, our emotive dimension, right? And that I think that the theater culture of the United States, for the most part, is really has flourished mostly with that at its core. I think there are other traditions, the German tradition and some parts of the English tradition, where you go to the theater to think, not to feel. You go to think about the world and the world that we live in. I think there's a little bit less of a tradition of that in the United States. There are obviously examples there have existed, but it's just not something that is done as often. So, I think that to ask a question like this, how did the world become beholden to an aberration of the monetizing impulse? How did finance become our way of being? And what is the result? What's the human result and what's the human cost of that? To not tell that tale in a sentimental way, and to not tell that tale in the misleading way that you center it onto a single character, as if a single point of view could encapsulate the entire system. It cannot. That's a fiction. It's a fiction.
Well, that's something else, because you raise the degree of difficulty by having a huge number of people and a huge
23
cast.
actors.
We need plays like that, and we need to see them in a forum like the Beaumont, where you have the exhilarating experience of agreeing with whoever has spoken last. The tragedy is, that everybody has their reasons, and everybody can make a case. If we really believe that the theater is the most democratic of art forms, if we can get discourse going, well, Ayad decided to really give that a shot, big time, in a page-turning way.
It's a bit
But
Shakespearean.
I want to.
Yes, it surely is a bit Shakespearean. It's more than a bit.
I was sitting in the beautiful Vivian Beaumont Theater watching your grand production where you keep this moving, and I thought, but there is an irony here that you're kind of preaching, number one, to the Blue State Choir of the people at Lincoln Center, and but secondly, to the wealthy who are sitting there in these seats.
Right.
Right.
What I wanted to do fundamentally was to write a play that could address decision makers in America. I wanted to open a conversation between those in the realm of finance and the theater in a way that was not moralizing, but that was canny and aware of the way that they operate and have operated, without a judgment on it, but with a lot of commentary about the consequences, so that they could see themselves, whether it was that they made money in the 80s or whether they're working now. And it was interesting, after second preview, one of the actors was going home on the subway, and a couple of young finance guys were sitting across from him, and they didn't recognize him, but he overheard their conversation. And the conversation was, well, isn't the commitment to efficiency ultimately worth it? And the other guy was like, you got to wonder what you've left behind. You got to start wondering what the consequences of this is. That's the conversation at core that the play is trying to initiate. At the end of the day, to write a play that people love, that's great. I'd love to do that. But I wanted, and Doug and I wanted to do something which was going to, in some way, spark a different kind of conversation.
Was that part of the reason that you fictionalized the names so that we don't have an automatic association with Michael Milken?
No, the reason that I sort of composited and fictionalized was because I had specific philosophical and dramaturgical ends. I'm not saying, it's always complicated to mention Shakespeare, because on the one hand, audiences think Shakespeare's boring, so you don't want to compare yourself to Shakespeare. On the other hand, Shakespeare is such a great writer that people think you're trying to say you're a great writer, right? So it's not good on both counts.
Well, I brought that up.
Okay, so one of the
you've
things that I spent a lot of time doing, and that Doug and I talked about a lot, was the Shakespearean approach to history, which is that you have the story of Richard II or Richard III, or you have the story of Henry V, and people know those stories. They know how they end, they know what they are. What Shakespeare's doing is he's taking a tale that folks know and transforming it in order to tell something about the era that he is living in now, then.
Yeah, this
right?
is not an 80s
right.
play.
So it wasn't a
No,
play.
it's an always
Right
in
now
America play.
play.
We only have a minute left, but I want to ask you, how soon into the process of this being written did you come in as director?
After the first draft.
Yeah,
After-
about 3 years ago.
Because here you have this I cannot stress how complex and satisfying your staging is of this play. But I last night reread the play, and there are these stage directions which are calling for such a thing. And I thought, well, did you read that before you came into it?
I mean, it was one of the most, aside from all the things we've discussed, the problem and the delight of taking all of that on was incredibly compelling to me. We wanted to create a kind of open stage, Shakespeare stage for our time, and to have scenes overtaking. I couldn't tell you today how many scenes there are in the play. I think it got so depressing. Like 64.
I think there's 42, but there's actually 64 scene changes.
Yeah. So that it became much more comforting to think of it as just Act 1 is one scene, Act 2 is one scene, and then we dive into Act 3. It all happens within the span of 2 hours and 18 minutes with an act break.
Yes.
But the momentum of the play became very, very important. And I hope the sense that no one is left off the hook, no one is condemned. The play really hopes to implicate and invite the audience to understand their part in
Right.
the system.
And when you start to like the Blue Bloods too much, then you reveal them as anti-Semites. So anyway, so all right.
Which they were.
Yes, it's very true. So, all right, well, it is a tremendously satisfying, blood-curdling, and kind of depressing, but in a good way,
Yeah. No, it's
production
true.
at the beautiful Lincoln Center Beaumont Theater Junk. Thank you so much,
thank you.
Ayad Akhtar. Thank you so much, Doug Hughes.
Thank you
for
Susan.
having us.
Congratulations.
Why us, Mr. Peterman? What did we do to attract your unwelcome attention? I'm fighting a battle to keep a business alive that's been in my family and in my community for 3 generations. Why don't you just go away? Find some other tree you can prune and piss on to your heart's content.
Tom, you don't have to.
Izzy, do you mind? Mr. Everson, due respect, we all live in the market. We respond to the market. We grow with the market. The market is the rule of our being. And those who don't obey the market begin to lag. And when they do, they draw notice because they're weak. And the weak are eventually consumed.
So, Jan, now we are going to discuss a new play that you and I can really relate to.
This is true. This is true. This is true.
This is 20th Century Blues, starring the revered actresses Polly Draper, Kathryn, Grody, and the play is written by Susan Miller. You are an Obie-winning playwright, and now you have put together this play, which, spoiler alert, features a cast focusing on women who are, what will we say, over 60?
Old?
Older women. A revelation.
What gave you the idea to do this?
Well, since I embody that particular
Demographic,
it wasn't too hard. But I really wanted to do a play about somehow putting generations together, but really focusing on these women. And what was great is that it wasn't like, someone asked me once, were you over listening in on my living room conversations? And I didn't take people that I knew to make the characters. They were just people or characters that I knew were going through things. And I thought that was a challenge, and also it could be fun to do.
when you're writing, are you like Edward Albee, where the characters come in and talk to you?
I don't think he and I are alike, though I admired him, and I loved his plays because they were one of the absurdist playwrights in a way that gave me the freedom to, go out of bounds with what I wrote. Actually, this is a more naturalistic play than I think I've ever written, really.
Yeah.
This is a play about 4 women who have known one another for like 40 years. So I'm interested in what spoke to each of you about your roles. You play sort of the Danny, sort of the ringleader, I would say, of the group. And you play Gabby, who seemed to be sort of the heart of the group. And I'm wondering what spoke to you about these characters.
I could relate to all of the characters. Couldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I could relate to the ambition of my character and the fact that she's an artist. She's a photographer, and she's about to have a retrospective done of her photography at the Museum of Modern Art. And she's ecstatic to use these photographs of her friends that she's taken once a year, every year since the day they met, 40 years before, in jail, just because they were protesters, not because they were, ardent criminals. And she comes up against a lot of resistance from her friends who don't want to be put into the retrospective for various reasons. And
Well, you're the one behind the camera, but they're the ones. They're
have
the
to
ones
be
who are suddenly going.
And it never occurs to me. It never occurs to me because I'm so thrilled with the way it all looks, that it doesn't occur to me that I am stepping on them in any way personally. And I think that's something that I can relate to.
Kathryn?
Well, I think for me, the radicalness of this play is such an important aspect of most women I know's lives because our friendships are the glue that holds us together. And that is a distinction from a lot of the men I know who are very envious of our ability to connect and be there for each other. And I certainly relate to Gabby's trying to make everything okay because I'm conflict averse, which is something I'll work on my whole life. And I hope to be really easy in another 20 years when I get pissed at something. But I'm working on it. But I think, first of all, seeing 4 women of a certain age all together, we could just stand there and people could come and go, oh my God, because we are
radical.
so disappeared. And it has infuriated me for a long time. And I have taken to, when I get calls for things, the first question I say is, does the person have Alzheimer's? Because if she is, I'm on strike for that, because I know so many people that are vibrant and curious and beginning new things and have friggin' wisdom that it's supposed to be accruing.
I was trying to kind of walk a fine line because I don't want the play to be about aging,
Right.
but about these women and what they're going through on every level. So
It's
I
about
hope
getting wiser. But when you say about women of a certain age, which I'll say over 60, being disappeared, that's such a good point. And I think of my body as old because there's pain, but I don't think of myself as old in terms of my mind. It was funny, one of my coworkers said to me, so I was referring to middle age, and he said, "You're not middle aged, you're old." And I
I would disagree.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is that what we're dealing with is the perception of other people,
Yeah.
you know, that not what our brains are telling us, because we're out there, you know, making mistakes and having adventures and doing interesting things. Yes, our knees hurt. And so I love that you've put that in your play, that these are fully rounded people.
Right.
Do you think of yourself as old ever?
Both, we went around the room and asked the cast, and Kathryn and I both said no, that we don't. Although two cast members did
said
see
yes.
themselves as older.
And one of them said, and proud of it, and that was
I think different people. I know little kids who seem like old men.
Right.
You know, there's just it's a personality more than it's an actual age, I think.
But how could you be actresses past a certain point and think of yourself as old and go out there and be actors?
Right.
Well, you have to invent. Often what we do is invent our own work. I mean, I started doing, you know, one-person shows when I was in my 40s. One, because it was about domestic life and motherhood, and nobody was talking about that. Somebody asked me, actually, when I had a second son, "Are you working now or just staying home having fun?" And beloved Joe Papp let me answer that question at the Public Theater. So I think Polly's written, you know, I mean, you start creating the material that nobody else is creating. And also, I do think it's curiosity in some way. People that stop being curious age in a different way than people that put themselves in new and risky and challenging situations that ask of them other things, I think. I hate the word senior, by the way.
We won't.
I mean, I prefer elder. I call myself
elder
late middle-aged or early elder, depending on the day. Do you know?
I just want to ask you, Polly, you broke through in this business in 30-something on television, very popular. And
so everyone knew my age.
yes, so right.
That's so annoying.
Right, because you do not look over 60, but I can brazenly say it because the whole world knows. But you think, people are watching me age, and very well, but people are watching me age?
You know, I've just embraced it now because I just feel like by the time, when I was 30, people were knowing my age. So I couldn't really, I had no wiggle room there.
And
where
we thought
other
30
actors
was
could
old.
keep saying, and we thought 30 was old. I remember my mother was wearing my 30-something jacket one time, and some kid went by and said, "No way, lady." So even that age that felt old to me at the time was, you know, way too young for my mother. So
it's 20th Century Blues at the Jewel Box Theater, at the Signature Theater. I think, though, you're going to get a lot of play on this. I think you're going to be doing it all over the country.
You hear that?
Oh, I think
you hear
so,
that?
too.
I did hear
I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
She not only said it on the air, she said it off the air.
It's like, you know, I mean, I think this is going to be every regional theater, every...
Absolutely. There were 2 women sitting behind me. They were purring through the whole show.
I love that.
They were just loving it.
Right,
and
right.
I think they're representative of a lot of women who want to see themselves on stage.
That's right. That's right.
Want to see, and let me also say, it was wonderful. There were women of all kinds. It's a diverse play as well. There's a lesbian woman, there's a woman of color, there are women who are married, women who are not, women who have children, women who don't, and also women who like their mothers. And we don't often see that.
Yeah, we don't ever see likable, lovable mothers.
Yeah.
Polly Draper, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kathryn Grody, thank you so much.
you.
Susan Miller, congratulations on writing this play. Thank you, Jan Simpson. What a pleasure. We'll see you back soon.
What was the crime, Max?
Crime.
The company's not been doing great, I know that, but we were surviving, inching toward the kind of change we need to be making. And now, Tressler's in there talking about selling my father's life's work to raise the money for me to buy back the business my grandfather started in the first place. We're going backward, Max. What'd I do wrong?
Nothing, Tom. There's no crime.
Is this the future? Is this what we have to look forward to, getting squeezed from every side for every last penny?
I hope not.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Dinelli Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you.